The vampire king came to take back his cursed child, but when a human woman, a mother, stood before him, holding the child tightly in her arms and facing him without fear, he stopped for the first time. The child's curse was never about blood. It was a test of love and humanity. In that single moment, the king was forced to remember his cruelty, his oath, and his own weakness. At last, he understood that true right does not come from power alone. The one who saved the child was also the one who changed the path of the curse. The night the king forgot to breathe. Mist curled between the trees like silent ghosts, and moonlight spilled across the old road in thin, trembling stripes. The vampire king, Lord Valen Dre, stepped out of the darkness as if the night itself had learned to walk. His coat was heavy with velvet and quiet power, and his pale hair caught the silver light like a blade. Yet it was his eyes, burning red, ancient, exhausted, that made the air feel thinner. He didn't come running. He didn't come roaring. He came the way a storm arrives. Calm first, then the world changes. Across from him stood a human woman named Alara, her boots muddy, her breath shaking, her arms wrapped around a small child bundled in a dark blanket. The child couldn't have been more than 3, with messy curls and a strange stillness, like he was listening to a song only he could hear. When the boy lifted his face, his eyes glowed the same red as the king's, soft, bright, and wrong in a human world. The forest seemed to pause at the sight. Even the wind went quiet, as if it didn't want to interrupt. Valen's voice came low and controlled, but something fragile hid underneath it. "Give him to me," he said. Not a threat, more like a plea he hated himself for making. Alara's arms tightened around the child so fast it looked like instinct had become armor. She didn't step back. She didn't bow. She raised her chin with the kind of courage that doesn't come from strength, but from love. "I don't know what you are," Alara whispered, "but I know what he is." Her eyes filled, not with terror, but with fierce tenderness. "He's a child, and he's afraid." The boy, Lucian, made a tiny sound, half sigh, half giggle, like he found the standoff confusing in the way only children can. He reached one small hand toward Valen's ornate collar as if the king were just another stranger with interesting clothes. The moment should have been funny, almost sweet, but it landed like thunder inside Valen's chest. He flinched, not from fear, but from memory. Because Valen hadn't come here to take a child. He had come to retrieve a curse. Long ago, a prophecy had branded Lucian as the cursed heir, the one whose blood would either save the vampire kingdom or end it. The elders had spoken of the boy like a weapon. They didn't say baby. They didn't say son. They said fate and danger and control. Valen had repeated their words for years, wearing authority like a mask so no one would see the crack underneath. But now that crack widened, because Alara wasn't holding a prophecy. She was holding a trembling, living soul who had fallen asleep against her shoulder on the walk here, trusting her heartbeat like it was home. Valen took one slow step forward. The air chilled. The leaves shivered. Alara didn't run. Instead, she did something so human it almost hurt to witness. She tried to comfort the child first. She rocked him gently and murmured, "It's okay. Look at me, not at him. You're safe." And Lucian listened. That made Valen stop. Not because he couldn't take the child, he could. Not because he lacked power, he didn't. He froze because he realized the boy responded to Alara's kindness more than to Valen's royal blood. In the quiet, Valen heard something that wasn't in any prophecy. The sound of a child choosing safety over destiny. A twig snapped behind Valen, his guard captain, Soren, emerging from the shadows with a stiff posture and a sharper expression. "My king," Soren said, voice firm with duty. "The council is waiting. The heir must return before dawn." Lucian blinked sleepily and then, almost as if he understood the tension, he smiled at Valen. A small, innocent smile that didn't ask for mercy, because it didn't believe the world required it. Valen's throat tightened. For the first time in centuries, the king felt a strange, dangerous urge. To protect something without being asked, without being owed, without being praised. Alara sensed the shift and whispered, "If you take him, you'll prove the curse is real. But if you see him, maybe you'll break it." Valen stared at the child. His jaw clenched, like he was holding back a storm inside himself. Then, very slowly, he reached toward Lucian, not to grab him, not to harm him, just to touch the edge of the blanket, as gentle as a man afraid of shattering glass. Lucian's tiny fingers caught Valen's hand. The boy's skin was warm. Warm like a human. Valen's eyes widened, and for a heartbeat his royal composure collapsed. "That's not possible," he murmured, voice barely there. Soren's hand moved toward the hilt at his side, tense with suspicion. "My king," he warned, "step away." Alara's breath hitched. The child's red eyes flickered brighter, as if something deep inside him had just awakened. And then Lucian spoke, his first clear word of the night, soft, innocent, and perfectly timed like a cruel joke from fate. "Papa." Valen didn't answer. He couldn't. Because in that single word, the prophecy didn't sound like a prophecy anymore. It sounded like a promise. And somewhere in the mist, hidden beyond the trees, a bell rang once, slow and distant, signaling that the council had already arrived to claim the cursed heir. Valen kept his hand in the child's grasp, frozen between his kingdom and his heart, as footsteps began closing in through the fog, and he realized he might have only one choice left. The fog thickened until it felt like the forest was holding its breath, and the distant bell's echo still trembled in the air. Valen's hand remained in Lucian's small grip, and the warmth of that touch didn't just surprise him. It frightened him, because warmth meant life, and life meant responsibility. Bootsteps pressed closer, measured and confident, the kind that belonged to people who had never been told no. Torches appeared between the trees, not blazing wildly but burning with a controlled, pale flame that didn't dance like normal fire. The council's lanterns. Tools meant to expose secrets, not light the way. Soren shifted to stand slightly in front of Valen, loyal in the rigid way soldiers are loyal. "My king, you know what they'll do if they see the boy like this," he murmured. His eyes flicked to Alara, then to Lucian. "They'll call it contamination. They'll call her a thief. They'll call the child unstable." Alara's arms tightened again, but her voice stayed steady. "He's not a sickness to be managed," she said, even though her lips trembled. "He's a child who gets scared of thunder and laughs when rabbits hop. If your council can't see that, then maybe your kingdom forgot what it means to be alive." Valen didn't answer immediately. His gaze was locked on Lucian, who was now studying Valen's face with open curiosity, as if the king were a storybook character that had wandered into the real world. Then Lucian did something so absurdly normal that it almost broke the tension. He yawned, patted Valen's sleeve like a friendly dog would, and said, "Cold." Alara gave a shaky little laugh through her fear. "He says that to everyone. If you're cold, he thinks you need a blanket." Valen's mouth twitched, almost a smile, but it didn't quite arrive. "He's wrong," Valen said quietly, as if speaking the truth could keep it in place. "I don't need." Lucian interrupted with determined toddler logic. "Blanket," he insisted, and tugged the edge of his own bundle toward Valen's hand, trying to share it. For a moment, Valen looked like a man being offered something he had never learned how to accept. The king of vampires, who had commanded armies and crushed rebellions with a glance, stood there hesitating over a child's clumsy kindness. Then the council's voices drifted in, smooth, educated, and mercilessly calm. "My king," called an elder from the fog. "We sense the heir's presence. Present him." Valen's shoulders straightened, the old posture of rule returning like armor sliding into place. Yet his eyes didn't harden the way they were supposed to. They stayed troubled, human in a way he would never admit. He lowered his voice to Alara. "If they see you holding him, they will not understand," he said. And when they don't understand, they punish. Ilara swallowed, her courage fighting her fear. "Then help me leave," she whispered. "Let me take him somewhere the prophecy can't reach." Soren snapped his head toward Valen. "My king." Valen lifted a hand, and Soren fell silent at once. The authority was effortless, but the pain behind it was. Valen stepped closer to Ilara and Lucian, close enough that Ilara could see the faint cracks in his composure, like a statue that had started to feel. "I can't let you run," Valen murmured. "Not because I want him taken, because they will hunt you until you break. The world beyond this forest is not kinder than the council. It is only louder." Ilara's eyes filled. "So what do we do?" Valen looked past her, into the fog where the lanterns swayed closer, and something ancient shifted inside him, a decision that tasted like ruin and relief at the same time. He leaned down slightly toward Lucian. "Do you trust me?" he asked, and the question sounded ridiculous because what child trusts a vampire king? Yet he asked anyway, as if he needed to hear a human answer. Lucian blinked slowly, then nodded with complete seriousness, like he was agreeing to share a cookie. "Yes." Valen exhaled, the closest thing to a prayer leaving him. "Then listen," he whispered, gentle but urgent. "When I say sleep, you close your eyes, no matter what you hear." Lucian giggled. "Sleep," he repeated, as if it were a game. Valen straightened and raised his voice just enough for the fog to carry it. "Bring your lanterns closer," he commanded the council. "You will not frighten my heir with your shadows." The elders emerged in a slow arc, 3 figures in dark robes trimmed with silver, their faces pale and unreadable. Their lantern light washed over Ilara first, and their eyes narrowed with instant judgment. "A human," one elder said, voice like ice polished smooth. "You allowed a human to touch him." Ilara stiffened. Valen felt Lucian's fingers tighten around his sleeve. Another elder lifted his chin. "The curse is active. We can feel it. Remove the child from her arms." Valen's voice stayed calm, but something dangerous lived beneath it. "No." The word landed heavier than any shout. Soren's eyes widened, not because he disagreed, but because he understood what that single refusal meant. In vampire law, the council could overrule a king when the heir was involved. Valen wasn't just defying them, he was inviting a civil fracture. The eldest elder stepped forward, lantern held high. "My king," he said softly, "your sentiment does you credit, but compassion is not governance. The child's curse will spread. The human will weaken him. He must be isolated, trained, and corrected." Lucian's eyes flickered brighter at the word, corrected. The air around him prickled, and even the trees seemed to lean away as if anticipating a storm. Ilara whispered, almost pleading, "Lucian, look at me. Breathe with me. It's okay." Valen noticed it then, the way Lucian steadied when Ilara spoke. Not because she had power, but because she had presence. She didn't control the child. She calmed him. Valen made his choice. He stepped between the elders and Ilara, shielding them both with his body. "You will not take him from the only arms that have ever taught him peace," he said. "If you want the heir, you answer to me." The elders exchanged glances, and the oldest one gave a faint, almost pitying smile. "So be it." He lifted his lantern, and its pale light pulsed once, like a signal. From the darkness behind the council, more figures moved in, silent and disciplined. Not soldiers, judges. Soren's hand trembled near his side. "My king," he whispered, "they brought the seal." Valen's heart, if it could still be called that, tightened. The seal was an ancient vow binding that could force obedience even from a king. It was the council's last weapon, used only when they believed the throne itself had become a threat. Ilara looked from Valen to the approaching judges, her voice breaking. "What is that? Valen, what are they going to do?" Valen didn't look away from the elders. "They're going to make me choose," he said quietly, in front of everyone. Lucian tugged Valen's sleeve again, sensing the fear that adults tried to hide. "Papa, blanket," he asked, still offering the edge of his wrap with stubborn kindness. Valen's eyes stung with something he didn't have a name for. He lowered his head and, for the first time, let the blanket brush his fingers, accepting it like a vow. Then he spoke one word, soft enough that only Lucian could hear. "Sleep." Lucian's eyelids fluttered. His glowing eyes dimmed as if a candle had been cupped by gentle hands. His head sank against Alara's shoulder, suddenly heavy, suddenly calm. The eldest elder's voice sharpened. "What have you done?" Valen lifted his chin, and the forest seemed to darken around him as if the night itself recognized its ruler. "I have hidden him," Valen said, steady as stone. "Not from you, from the curse you keep trying to wake." The elder's smile vanished. "Then you admit it, the heir's power is real." Valen's gaze didn't flinch. "Yes," he said, "and you don't deserve it." A hush fell so deep it felt like the world had stopped turning. Soren stared at Valen with a mixture of awe and dread, because he knew what came next. The council could not allow those words to live. The eldest elder lifted the seal, an ancient ring of black metal that drank the lantern light, and pointed it at Valen's chest. "By the old vow," he declared, "we bind the king." Valen took one slow step forward instead of back, placing himself fully between the seal and the sleeping child. His voice dropped to a near whisper, meant only for Alara. "When I fall," he said, "run into the ravine path, don't look back." Alara's eyes widened in horror. "No, I won't leave you." Valen's expression softened, briefly, painfully. "That's why you must." The seal flared, and the air snapped like a tightened chain. Valen didn't move. And the moment the binding light struck him, Lucian, still asleep, smiled. Not a child's normal smile. A knowing one. As if, somewhere inside his dreams, the cursed heir had been waiting for this exact betrayal, and was about to answer it. The binding light wrapped around Valen like invisible chains, and for the first time, Alara saw the king's hands tremble. Not with fear of pain, but with fear of becoming the kind of ruler who obeys cruelty just to keep a crown. The elders stood in a half-circle, calm as judges who believed they were righteousness itself. Soren's jaw was tight, his loyalty tearing him in two directions, while Alara backed away step by step, still holding Lucian, still refusing to believe the night could steal everything at once. The child slept against her shoulder, lashes resting on his cheeks, his little fingers curled like he was holding onto a dream. "Your Majesty," the eldest elder said, voice smooth and final, "you will surrender the heir, you will renounce the human, you will restore order." Valen's red eyes lifted, burning, but not with rage, with clarity. "Order without mercy is just fear wearing perfume," he said quietly. The words didn't sound like a speech. They sounded like something he had learned too late, carved out of loneliness and regret. The seal tightened, and Valen's knees bent slightly, as if the earth itself had grown heavier under him. Still, he did something no one expected. He turned his head toward Soren, meeting his captain's eyes with a gentleness that felt almost human. "Soren," Valen said, voice strained, "you once asked me why I never laugh." Soren swallowed. "My king now is not." "It is," Valen insisted, a soft urgency underneath the iron. "Because the boy laughed, and I realized I didn't hate the sound." Soren's expression cracked. In it was the young soldier who had once believed the throne could be honorable, before politics taught him to be cold. He looked at Lucian, small, sleeping, innocent, and then at Alara, who stood with her back straight even though tears ran down her face. Alara whispered, "Please, don't let them make him a monster just so they can feel in control." At that, Lucian stirred. Not awake, just shifting, as if the darkness around him had become too loud. His red glow flickered under his eyelids like a storm trapped behind a door. Valen felt it too. The curse wasn't a hunger for destruction. It was a response, an emotional weapon that woke when Lucian sensed fear, rejection, and threat. The council had been poking it for years, then blaming the child for bleeding. Valen forced his voice steady. "He doesn't need chains," he said. "He needs love and patience. He needs someone brave enough to stay gentle." The eldest elder raised a brow. "Gentle," he repeated, as if the word itself were foolish. "A king cannot be gentle. A king must be obeyed." Valen's mouth tightened. "Then perhaps I have been a king for too long," he said, "and a father for too little." The elder's eyes hardened. "Enough," Captain Soren seized the child. The command hit the clearing like a blade. Everyone turned to Soren. He was the hinge the night would swing on. For a heartbeat, he didn't move at all, and in that stillness Alara understood. This wasn't just about vampires and humans. It was about what people do when authority tells them to forget their conscience. Soren stepped forward. Alara flinched, bracing herself, but Soren didn't go toward her. He moved to stand beside Valen. "My king," Soren said, voice shaking but clear, "I will not take a child from the arms that kept him calm. If that is treason, then I have been loyal to the wrong thing." The council's faces tightened in disbelief. The eldest elder lifted the seal again, anger seeping into his control. "Then you will be bound as well." Valen's eyes narrowed, and something inside him settled, like a man finally accepting the cost of doing right. He looked at Alara, and his voice softened to a near whisper. "Now," he said. Alara turned and ran toward the ravine path, Lucian's blanket pressed to his cheek. Her breath tore in her chest, and branches scratched her sleeves as the fog tried to swallow her whole. Behind her, she heard the council shout, heard boots surge forward, heard Soren's sharp command to the guards who still trusted him. And then another sound. A small laugh. Lucian S. It was sleepy and bright, like a child giggling at a silly secret. Alara glanced down mid-run, panicked he had woken at the worst moment, but his eyes were still closed. The laugh didn't come from wakefulness. It came from somewhere deeper. The air around them warmed for a moment, and the fog thinned as if the forest had decided to protect them. Fireflies, dozens, then hundreds, rose from the underbrush, swirling into a glowing river that flowed ahead of Alara, lighting the hidden path through the trees. Alara slowed, stunned. "Lucian," she whispered. The child murmured in his sleep, one word slipping out like a prayer learned before language. "Home." Behind them, the council's lantern light flickered, confused by the sudden moving stars. Alara realized the curse wasn't only darkness. It was power shaped by emotion. And Lucian, raised in kindness, was shaping it into something protective. She reached the ravine's edge, the world dropping away into a narrow passage lined with stones and roots. The fireflies streamed downward like a staircase made of light, showing a safe way through. But she couldn't keep running forever, not from an entire kingdom. She stopped, heart pounding, and looked back. In the clearing, Valen stood with the seal's binding still clamped around him, yet he was upright, refusing to kneel. The elders were furious now, their calm masks slipping. One of them lunged forward to pursue Alara, but Valen shifted his body, still bound, blocking the path with nothing but his presence. "No," he said again, and the single word carried more courage than any roar. The eldest elder's voice turned cold. "You are choosing a human over your throne." Valen's gaze didn't waver. "I am choosing my child over my fear," he answered. "If the throne demands I become cruel, then the throne is the curse." For a moment, even the council hesitated. Because those words did something dangerous, they made the truth sound simple. Then the seal flared brighter, trying to force Valen down. Lucian, still in Alara's arms, opened his eyes. They glowed, not with menace, but with heartbreaking awareness, as if he could feel his father's pain from across the fog. He lifted one small hand toward the clearing, palm open. And the fireflies stopped swirling. They hovered in the air, perfectly still, as if waiting for permission. Alara's voice broke. "Lucian, sweetheart, it's okay. We're safe. Don't hurt anyone." Lucian looked at her, and in his gaze was something that didn't belong to a toddler, an old sadness, a deep understanding of being treated like a problem. He didn't cry. He didn't scream. He simply leaned his forehead against Alara's collarbone for 1 second, collecting comfort the way a wounded thing collects warmth. Then he looked back at Valen. Lucian's little fingers curled. The seal's light sputtered, not shattered by violence but softened, like a knot loosening when you finally stop pulling the rope. The binding didn't explode. It faded. The air released a long, relieved sigh. Valen's knees buckled anyway, not from force, but from emotion. He caught himself with one hand against the ground, breathing like a man who had been holding his breath for centuries. When he looked up, his eyes were wet. He didn't wipe them away. The eldest elder staggered back, shaken. "Impossible," he hissed. "No cursed heir can unbind the seal." Valen rose slowly, voice quiet and fierce. "He is not cursed," he said. "He is responding. There is a difference, and you have been too proud to learn it." Soren stepped forward, placing himself beside Valen like a shield. Around them, several guards hesitated, then lowered their weapons, not in rebellion, but in relief. They were tired of pretending that coldness was strength. The council read the room and realized something terrifying. They could punish one king, maybe even two. But they couldn't easily punish an idea once it spread through the people who enforced their rules. The eldest elder's face tightened. "If you do this," he warned, "your kingdom will fracture." Valen's voice softened, and somehow that softness felt more powerful than any threat. "Then let it fracture," he said, "so it can heal correctly." He turned toward Alara at the ravine, and for the first time his expression wasn't a mask. It was simply a father trying to learn how to be good. "Alara," he called, "I won't ask you to trust me blindly, but I will earn it day by day if you let me." Alara stood frozen, torn between fear and hope. She looked down at Lucian, who was now rubbing his eyes like any sleepy child after a long, confusing night. Lucian pointed at Valen and said, completely serious, "Blanket." Alara let out a shaky laugh, half-sob. Even in the middle of prophecy and politics, the child's priorities were adorably simple. Warmth, safety, love. Valen's mouth finally softened into a real smile, small, stunned, and fragile, like the first sunrise after endless winter. "Yes," he murmured, voice cracking. "A blanket." He took off his heavy royal cloak, fur-lined, embroidered, the symbol of everything the council worshipped, and walked forward with empty hands. Each step was a choice. Each step said, "I'm not here to take. I'm here to give." He draped the cloak around Alara and Lucian, careful, respectful, as if they were the ones wearing the crown. The elders watched in silence, unable to stop him without exposing themselves as the true threat. Soren exhaled like someone who had been drowning and finally reached air. Valen looked at Lucian, eyes shining. "I stood frozen because I thought power was all I had," he said softly. "But you," he swallowed, "you reminded me I can still be kind." Lucian blinked, then patted Valen's cheek with a sleepy hand, gentle, unquestioning. The gesture was so innocent it made every prophecy feel stupid. Alara's voice trembled. "What happens now?" Valen turned toward the council, his posture straight but no longer arrogant. "Now," he said, "we build a different kingdom. One where a child isn't trained to be feared. One where humans aren't treated like stains. one where strength includes humility. The eldest elder's eyes narrowed. And if the curse returns? Valen didn't look away. Then we meet it with patience, he said. Because the deepest message your prophecies forgot is this: what you call a curse often becomes a gift when it's raised in love. The council retreated, not defeated by force, but cornered by truth and by the loyalty shifting in front of them. Their lanterns vanished into the fog, leaving the clearing dim and quiet again. Ilara held Lucian tighter, and Valen stood close enough to protect them, but far enough to respect her fear. Soren looked between them and gave a breathy, disbelieving laugh. "So this is what rebellion looks like," he muttered. "A blanket, a brave human, and a king learning how to be a father." Ilara managed a watery smile. "Don't forget the fireflies." Soren glanced up, and sure enough, the glowing swarm returned, drifting overhead like a soft, living crown. Valen watched the lights with a calm he'd never worn before. "We'll have hard days," he admitted. "People will resist. Some will call this weakness." Ilara nodded. "Let them. Kindness takes more courage than cruelty." Lucian yawned hugely, then nestled into Valen's cloak and whispered, "Home," like he was naming the future. Valen looked at his son, then at Ilara, and finally at the forest path ahead. The suspense wasn't gone, because rebuilding is always harder than running, but the fear had changed shape. It had become something they could face together. They walked forward into the fog, not as captor and captive, not as monster and victim, but as three hearts refusing to let a prophecy decide who they would become. And as the moonlight followed them between the trees, Valen realized the real curse had never been Lucian's blood. It had been a kingdom that forgot how to love,